I want to bring in Shahien Nasiripour on the phone. He's our HuffPost chief financial and regulatory correspondent who's been in Boston covering this story. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you saw yesterday?
Sure. Thanks for having me, first off. Well, so yesterday I got to the scene shortly after the explosions, and by that point everything had already been cordoned off, and a lot of folks had already been evacuated or were in process of being evacuated. And so, my kind of first observations were just, throngs of distraught marathoners who, every year folks travel to Boston to participate in the Boston Marathon. And for them, this experience will forever be changed. And so there were a lot of parents kind of consoling young children. A lot of police were there trying to direct folks away from the scene and just even kind of beyond, blocks beyond where the incident took place, and mass confusion and a bit of hysteria. And there was just no information to be had. So shortly thereafter, we go to the Westin Hotel near Copley Square, near the site of the incident, where officials hold their first press conference, and they basically had, very little information and not very many answers. At first, for example, they thought that an explosion at this library, the JFK library, was connected to these two blasts, and then
was that just a coincidence? Is the sense now that was just a coincidence, or what is the understood connection between the two at this point?
Well, at the time, they thought that there may be a connection. Later on, they determined that there was no connection at all. There was just, an explosion a small explosion at the library, I think due to some kind of utility issue. So there was no connection.
There was no
it was later determined. But at the time, there was so much confusion, people didn't know, and there were controlled explosions, going off near the parade route, because folks in there, right after the explosions, just everyone ran away, dropping their belongings in their bags, and so the streets were littered with unattended bags, and so police at the time were treating each of those as potential explosive devices. And so the police commissioner said yesterday, and this was, I want to say, around maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock or so, that residents and businesses in the area would be hearing the sounds of bombs going off for the next few hours as they began to detonate potentially unexploded devices. And so that was kind of my introduction to this. And then yesterday, once the victim toll started to rise and the injury count rose from, initial counts of 50, 60, and then ended the night at more than 140, I went to the hospital where I tried to look for, the families of the victims and hospital workers who could kind of shed light on what they had seen and what their thoughts were.